Claude Simon was a French writer who died, I think, in 2005. Today's video is principally going to be on Claude Simon. He won a Nobel Prize in 1985, and other than that, his biography for a French writer might be a little bit unusual, but compared to an American writer, it's actually pretty normal. In the U.S., we have a very strong tradition of former military servicemen becoming writers. So if we go back, 100 years ago, and look at Hemingway. Hemingway was an ambulance driver, but he was experiencing war firsthand. And Claude Simon was a cavalryman in France. And the French apparently had a cavalry much longer than most other countries. They had that cavalry into World War II. And in World War II, Claude Simon saw combat. He was a prisoner of war, and he escaped confinement and became part of the French resistance. Now, I understand that I started this video just immediately talking about Claude Simon. I wanted to maybe hook you a little better than I have in previous videos. It's been about 45 days probably when this video is going to be published since the last time I made a video or updated the channel. I can't really justify it from a YouTube perspective. I've been concerned with work and been focusing on that. I've also been reading a lot of Claude Simon, and I don't want to make a partial video of him. What I've decided to do is that the Bibliothèque de Pléiade of Claude Simon, like this, if you're familiar with French writers, you've probably seen these before. If you've watched my videos in the past, you will have seen Bibliothèque de Pléiade books. They are like the Library of America editions that we have in the U.S. And this book contains 7 works. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it contains 8 works. One of these works is a short story. When I actually get into Claude Simon and talking to you guys, I'm probably not going to devote much time to it. There's much more that he's better known for. The other thing that this collection has is his speech for winning the Nobel Prize. Again, there's probably not a whole lot there for me to go over. It's not that these pieces of writing could not be gone over. I'm sure that the short story in the correct context could be very useful. It could be very valuable. Teaching people different techniques and so on of managing short fiction. It's very much like his other work. Very long sentences, not a lot of dialogue and so forth. But yeah, it's interesting. I think there are long sentences. I can't actually remember. So, we started off with Claude Simon, and I'm going to take a minute here to do my kind of typical "how you guys doing" thing. So in 40 days, I've been very busy. Again, I don't know the exact number it's been, but I think it was 43 when I checked my YouTube studio. But I've read the Bibliothèque de Pléiade and the first one. I'm going to make another video for the second one. The first one, it's really been more like I've read this twice. Most of the works in here I did read twice. I found them very difficult. So this is not a big recommendation for French language readers, simply because I know that I can read French better than most people who have not either grown up speaking French or did not study it in depth at a university. Again, my French isn't perfect, but I do read a lot in it. And I found these books very difficult. Most of them I did reread. Triptyque, which I'll talk about, I actually read 3 times. That's fitting because it's a story of 3s. But this was not all that I read. I wanted to take a moment to do a little overview of what my last, say, month plus has been like. Go to work, do my reading after work. So I was really interested in reading some writing by a woman or women. And it felt like it had been a long time since I had read a novel by a woman. And what I decided to read was The Left Hand of Darkness. A lot of the writing that I review probably has more of a scholarly air to it than Ursula K. Le Guin. But I am a science fiction fan. I do have my Ballard videos, and I always thought about making a PKD video. The only problem is that I don't want to reread stuff that I've already read and basically remember, but might not remember well enough to really talk about with you guys. So Ursula K. Le Guin is a big name in science fiction. I've known about her probably 25 years. My first Ursula Le Guin story was at a freshman English comp course. We read The Ones Who Walk Away from Omaha. And since then I've kind of thought about maybe reading her, but never had. I chose The Left Hand of Darkness because it says left hand, and also because, if it's going to be political, we know that Ursula Le Guin is kind of an anarchist type figure. So that's going to be interesting. If that were what it was, it's not. But I didn't know any of her Hainish cycle. I didn't know anything about that. I just saw Left Hand of Darkness. I'll go out and read it, and we'll go from there. Now, I think this was actually a very literate sci-fi novel. I do watch, BookTube on YouTube. I probably don't watch as much as some people who make better videos than I do. But Ursula Le Guin is a figure who pops up a lot. So I've seen her talked about in YouTube videos. One guy that I saw on a channel that's growing said that he couldn't stand this one. He really liked The Dispossessed, but he did not like this book. He found it meandering and sometimes unclear, if I'm remembering right. Those are the qualities about this book that I liked most. Reading this book really didn't feel much like a science fiction reading, so much as reading a writer who, globe-trotting writer, somebody who's seen a lot of environments and writes a bit of travel writing, like a Conrad or a Nepal, or somebody like that. As I said, it's kind of a very literary sci-fi novel, but I would recommend this. I thought it was great. I don't know what her other books are like. I imagine this would probably be one of my favorite ones. For me, there aren't very structured hierarchies of diverse writers, and I like this guy a lot more than him, but only a little bit more than him. It's basically 3 tiers. It's real good, it's okay, and it's bad. And I try to split that up with the A or the S through F ranking because that's common talk on YouTube. But for me, Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin was an S-tier book. I should qualify that and say that it's not my favorite book, but I have trouble imagining that she would do a better job on another one. I might just like another one more, but I thought this was executed incredibly well, and it's a very literate science fiction novel. And I'm saying that because of the style it's written in, not because of allusions to James Joyce or something. So I would recommend The Left Hand of Darkness. Now, the next book that I read that was not Claude Simon, who we'll be talking about, was Woman Hating by Andrea Dworkin. And the title of the book is that because she's criticizing it. I would never have read Andrea Dworkin if I did not talk to women. She would have scared me, being this gigantic feminist figure. I probably would not be terribly interested in her. Her writing can be forceful and so forth, and she has a reputation as kind of a pugilist. I really enjoyed this. I found out that Andrea Dworkin was kind of like Marx Online, but for a certain type of feminist. You sort of read all of her, and then you might pick and choose, but she's kind of a foundational figure for many people. I don't know if that's the case in academia. I don't think it is. But for people who are exploring feminism materially and really in their daily lives, women, apparently Dworkin is talked about. I've read this, pornography, and intercourse. Of the three, pornography is probably the one I would recommend first. But the thing about Dworkin is she's such a powerful writer. She's so forceful. She uses a lot of curse words too. She swears, but she does all these things. She gets you all riled up, and I mean, I'm a man, and I read Andrea Dworkin, and I'm ready to go out and do some activism. You know, that's basically how I feel about it. Like, yeah, let's do that. You're a very engaging writer. Woman Hating was, I think, her first book. This is like an A. This is probably a B, B plus, A minus probably. Let's say B plus, A minus. But I would recommend this to most people. I wouldn't say this is a must read though. I think everybody with any curiosity as to how women's work is handled and how certain aspects of our economy function should be interested in her book Pornography. There are a lot of writers who have written on the material situations of that industry. I would be inclined to recommend you Paul B. Preciado, definitely. I've talked about him in other videos that I've made. But basically what I'm saying is I read this by Andrea Dworkin in between the Claude Simon novels, and it was not a waste of time. The other book of hers I might consider reading is called Right Wing Women, but I'm not totally sure I'm going to commit to that. I want to read some more Judith Jack Halberstam, but I've got two of their books that I haven't read yet that sound interesting to me. But I'm really not much of a gender theory guy. It's more that I read 2 books a week, probably, maybe 3 sometimes 1, but on average 2. And when you spend that much of your free time reading, you jump around a lot and read things that you might not think are immediately interesting to you, just for a change of pace. So my next gender studies type or queer studies type reading will probably be J. Jack Halberstam. But Andrea Dworkin was a good read. As I said, it's my 3rd book of hers that I've read, and I'm got nothing else to say about it. It's a pretty positive thing. The final books that I read with Claude Simon are going to be famous, and they're controversial for the same reason Dworkin's controversial. This is the essential writings of Lenin, Vladimir Lenin. I read What Is to Be Done and Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And I read those because I have a list of Marx's books that I was curious about. I've been reading through it, got it from a university, and Lenin was included on that list. I'm not somebody who's a follower of Lenin necessarily, and I certainly am not somebody who would have supported certain governments in certain times of the last century. Politically, I'm of the left. I think that's kind of obvious. I just talked about Andrea Dworkin, and now I'm talking about Lenin. But what is to be done basically comes down to a plan for political action in the media. So he kind of outlays different movements and how these different movements can be handled. It's an okay book. It's a historical book. You could read this for history. You could read it for theory. You could read it as literature. You could read it as political science. So I think that the book probably, for rating it, depends on how you're reading it or what the context is. I don't have much to say about Lenin, either positively or negatively. These books were things that I certainly had sympathies with, but I would not necessarily, as I've said, go out professing my adherence to any real political situation I've been exposed to in the last decade, or 20 years even. It's never been... I read, political theory, but in some ways I'm not very political, in others I'm political. I try to watch the news. So let's say these are both unrateable. I'd probably give them like a B+. They're not very exciting. It's theory. Typically with theory, you really like the thing that you're reading, and then rating it based on style or other aspects of that is kind of unimportant. So I would say like a B or a B+ for both imperialism and what is to be done. Imperialism is more about how it's kind of a natural outgrowth of the current capitalist exchange process and finance process, and how involvement in other regions, other territories, is just it's kind of a natural outgrowth of that. Of course, for somebody like Lenin, that's a negative thing. He only sees the negative aspects of those political movements. So, I'm looking at my clock, and it's been almost 20 minutes. And I haven't actually introduced myself, I don't think, this video yet, and we're not even at the nuts and bolts of this video. So, this is a several books video. My name is Mark, and if you're still interested, this is a review of 5 books by Claude Simon. Okay, so if this was all I was doing, you probably wouldn't be super excited. It's just one small little tome, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to include those other books. There are 8 works in here. I'm going to go by the order they're in the book. Now, these works, what's unfortunate is that this is chronologically organized for this book. But the second tome has, I think it's 8 or 9 other novels in it, shorter novels. He's typically around 200 to 300 pages. But those works are also chronological. And he starts at the beginning of his career with each book, and it goes to the end. So this book ends with Le Jardin du Plan. And Le Jardin du Plant is the Garden of Plants. It's on the longer side, and it's his second to last work. Now, I would think that Le Jardin du Plant is probably a good book to get started with. But before I get into that, let's just start here. I'll go through these books. I don't think this is going to take a super long time, but I wanted to mostly talk about the experience of reading Claude Simon. The other thing I wanted to do was I've gotten a few messages on my channel, and I don't get a whole lot of comments. So any comments that I see are going to be immediately noticed by me. And I've taken ideas to make videos based on what I've seen in comments. There was a comment on my last video that was just posted like 2 or 3 days ago, and the guy asked if I could talk about what it's like to learn French to read it, and what it's like to learn French by reading it. There was a video that I made a couple months back, and I talked about breaking your book algorithm in things like Goodreads and Amazon. And I suggested doing that by learning a second language, because you will always be gathering from outside sources, different countries. It's a whole other. I use different bookstores to buy books from French. In French, not all the time, but there are certain bookstores that specialize in that, or carry French books exclusively. Yeah. So I am going to link that video in the description to this video. It's not my favorite video. It's not perfect. I probably am a little long-winded at times, which is not new for this. You've seen my other videos. But if you're interested in what it's like to kind of learn French and how I did that, you can see in that video. So it is something that I've tried to address when people have asked. If there is still desire for additional content on what it's like to be a French learner or a long-term language learner, I understand online there are whole communities about this. So this is not something that I'm exceptional at. French is a relatively easy language to learn from English because there's a lot of cognates. And on top of that, this is just something I do for fun. There are people who speak many languages much better than me. It's probably better to check out those YouTubers. But I would be open to discussing, again, more specifically, if I had some suggestions, basically what it's like to be a French learner, and a dedicated French learner. Okay, so for Claude Simon, the first book in here is Le Vent, which means the wind. What's unique about the French version is that it has a subtitle, Tentative de restitution d'un retable baroque. And the reason why I wanted to mention this is because of the word baroque. This is not something that we say often in the US and in English literature. I've heard Barry Hannah, who's a postmodern writer. He's passed away now, but wrote some novels and a whole lot of short stories. He's most known for being a short story writer. He's described his work as more Baroque than Hemingway. But in this case, Baroque basically means that he writes like Proust and Faulkner. Now, Le Vent is... it's included in these works because it's kind of considered Simon's first real novel. Now, he wrote, I believe it was 3 novels prior to this. Those 3 novels are I don't believe, are still published, they might be. They're going to be much harder to find in English translation. Le Vent is available in English translation. Again, it's The Wind. I did check that, but I don't know all of the statuses, or is it statuses? I don't know the status of all of the books in this collection in English. Now, the introduction to the Bibliothèque de la Pléiade book discusses how Le Vent sort of resembles L'Étranger, de Albert Camus. It resembles that because a guy, I think he's getting an inheritance. He goes to this hotel to live at. You know, it's we don't typically use the word hotel like that anymore, but there are hotels where people just live. That's kind of what they're for. And there he meets a woman with some kids, and this kind of ex-boxer who's kind of a bruiser type figure. So the introduction to my Bibliothèque de la Pléiade talked about how there are some parallels between Camus and Le Vent, L'Étranger et Le Vent. I would not say The Wind is much like The Stranger. It is for like the first half of the book. But stuff happens about halfway through the book for Simon that changes that. And in L'Étranger, or the Stranger, about the halfway point is when there's the murder. So, of course, that type of murder does not pass in The Wind. I'm not inclined to recommend The Wind to anybody. I have to rate these in a certain way as to rank them. And The Wind, for me, is going to be the bottom of the rank. So, Le Vent, I'm just going to say it's a C. It's not a bad book. It's not better than the other stuff. When Simon is known for basically writing what are called anti-novels, often. And he's more experimental and aggressive in his experiments in his other work. So Le Vent, we'll say, is a C. The next book we'll talk about is La Route de Flandre, and or The Flanders Road. I had bought this in a paperback. I had not planned on buying these. About a year ago, probably more like a year and a half, I read the book Le Tramway, de Claude Simon. And I thought it was okay. It's the last novel he wrote. Like I said, I thought it was okay. It certainly wasn't bad. It just didn't do anything for me. And after I read the book, I promptly forgot about it. I learned about Claude Simon mostly through YouTube. And I saw some videos of The Flanders Road. I thought, oh, it's a French novel. I can practice my French. I'm going to like the novel probably based on what I'm hearing. Let's go there. The word fragmented is used by practically everybody who I've seen comment on Claude Simon. And this is basically a fragmented narrative of a guy who's on a horse. Well, no. It's fragmented. It's happening at different times. The story is the story of a cavalry, and the general or the commander is sniped, and then the cavalry comes into modern military equipment and weapons, and it's done away with. And while this is happening, there is an adulterous woman and a man who's trying to sleep with her or has an affair with her, and some stuff's not clear. And, well, there's a guy who's definitely having an affair with her. I'm pretty sure. It's hard for me to imagine him not having an affair with her based on what's in the book. But the point is that you're getting most of this kind of story against the backdrop of World War II. I've seen Simone grouped with Cormac McCarthy. Having read 8 works by, or actually 9 because I did read Le Tramway, by Simone, I would not readily make that comparison, but there are certainly worse comparisons. Simone is probably in general less violent than McCarthy. This novel in particular is the most violent by Simone that I've read. But this is not on the level of violence that you would associate with No Country for Old Men. It is a war story, though, if you can call it a story. What I'm going to say is that Simone is considered like the premier writer in the nouveaux roman, the new novel. And before Simone, the only other person that I thought of in the nouveau roman was that I had read was what's her name? Nathalie Sarraute. And when Sarraute writes, you kind of get the feeling that she doesn't want to talk about character at all. I kind of feel that's the case with Simone. So this is a novel where he names his characters. In The Wind, he names all of the characters that I can remember. In this one, he's named most of the characters. I think there are some extras who are not named. By the time we get to Le Jardin du Plan, or Des Plans, there are characters are rarely named. Yeah, I think in pretty much everything that he writes after this, he's only naming characters when it's essential for keeping track of the story, in his judgment, to know the name of a character. So it's just something he doesn't do. The other thing is he basically doesn't give you backstory. There's a lot of pushing forward in the story, and the way backstory is delivered is through flashback. You don't get a long page of description of the history of something. When he uses description, he's describing scenery, character, physical appearance, stuff like that. He doesn't do that lore building or character building through authorial asides. This is an S tier book. This is the best book, best novel that I've read this year. It's better than the other ones of Simone, but Triptyque I thought was pretty close to this. I cannot recommend this book enough. I heard about it on YouTube. I'm going to try to pay it forward and talk about it on YouTube. It's a really good novel. It's published by NYRB, I believe the English one is. So that's Flanders Road, and that's an S tier book. So after La Route de Flandre, we've got Le Palace, or The Palace. The Palace is about the Spanish Civil War. The book is kind of bookended. There are characters in the first chunk of the book. Typically, they're named based on nationality. Palace is a hotel, so these are different nationalities living in a hotel, and we get some more typical novel-like interaction in that first part of the novel. But again, we're not getting really anything about who these people are. The way Simone writes, it's just images and dialogue. And there's a shooting. And a major part of the center of the book, kind of the middle section, think of the book as in thirds, is mostly description about the world around the hotel. You know, there's a Spanish Civil War and stuff going on. I thought it was interesting. I wasn't sure what I was going to say when we got on this camera about this. But basically what I would say is that if you can get the novel from the library, I know it's available in English, get the novel from the library. I think it's a good book. I probably wouldn't recommend buying it. It's not super long. It's, like I said, it's very interesting. It's kind of forwardly experimental. There's no way you could imagine Simone writing that and not thinking, oh, I'm going to be an experimental novelist. So self-consciously experimental. It's probably not going to be cheap if you can find it in English, because I don't think it's printed anymore. But I have seen online videos where a guy was holding an English language copy of the book. I think that was Palace, was one of the books that he had. So let's give Palace or Le Palace, let's say that's, let's give it a B. So that's Le Palace, and we're giving that a B. The next is Le Chevelure de Bérénice, with the, in brackets, Femme. This is the short story. I don't think the short story is available in English. It's at most like 20 pages, I think. What I remember most of it is there's like a small beach or something and 3 women. Typically when there are 3 women, it's associated with witchcraft because of Shakespeare. But I don't remember anything like witchcraft in the story. I'm going to say that's a C also. It mostly just felt like it was added into this collection. The short story and the Nobel lecture both are like, I mean, these are the Bibliothèque de la Pléiade. It's for a completionist. You get a very good idea of who Simone was as a person and a writer by reading through them. So these are for posterity. That short story, though, it is what it is. Next, we've got La Bataille du Pharsale. I think in English it's the Battle of Pharsale. I think Pharsale is what it is. It's a area in Greece. The book is also kind of a triptych. There is a first section where it's a man going through this area, Pharsale, and most of what he's doing is he's admiring art, is what we get a lot of. I mean, there's other stuff happening, but like when I think of the book, most of what I think about is the associations with art. There are soldiers and stuff, you know, this is not, yeah. But that first section is mostly will have you thinking about how time is present or how history is present. And what Simone does in that book is throughout the book he has his narrator throughout that first section at least. I don't remember it so much in the other sections. That first section though, he's got quotes from various writers throughout time. I believe they go chronologically, and he starts out by quoting one of the Greek historians, but he quotes Proust either once or twice. There's one epigraph before a book or a chapter begins from Le Recherche, In Search of Lost Time, and he quotes he quotes something that I'm almost positive is from either The Captive or The Fugitive. One of the later volumes of the work. That pops up in the actual text. And what he's doing is he's quoting these classic books, and it brings up this sense of culture again. And so there's that. Now, the second part of the triptych is very descriptive passages on things that seem unrelated. Now, each of these sections has a title. That first section is called like Achilles Wounded at Rest or something. I don't remember what the second section is titled, but the third section is titled Chronology of Events. Now, he's basically describing like nouns. Like there's a section on soldiers, there's a section on a machine, and so on and so forth in that middle section. In that final section, it seems like he brings up using the same language that he used in those first sections, or those middle sections, throughout that final third. It's not really a story, but it's from a woman's perspective, and it's a bit different. There is a sex scene in the novel, if I remember right, in the woman's section. I don't know totally how the three parts of La Bataille de Pharsale fit together. I believe it is available in English as the Battle of Pharsale, but one of the problems with reading a writer like Claude Simon is that he's as complicated as Faulkner, but we haven't had 100 years to talk about his work. He died in 2005, and I don't think he's going to be as big as Faulkner, probably for good reason, although I like Simon a lot. But you can't find material on these books as easily as you can with Faulkner. I remember reading The Sound and the Fury and having a question about Benji's section, and I just looked on Wikipedia, and the whole thing is mapped out on Wikipedia. It's rather extensive. It's really sort of impressive. You look up Claude Simon's novels in English, and there's no Wikipedia section for them. So I check the French Wikipedia, and I look up, say, the Battle of Pharsale, or Pharsalis, I think is what it is in English. It's a Greek word, Pharsalis. But all it says is the date of publication of the book, and then it's a novel. So it's a bit hard to find the secondary sources that might have bridged that question for me. I really enjoyed the book. I did read it twice. I wanted to have more to say than just talk about the quotes that are in that first section. That was basically all I could really focus on. So I reread it. I realized I'm still not totally sure how this fits together. I understand very easily how the first section and the last section fit together. I'm a little confused on that middle. Because of my difficulty understanding it, I'm going to give this like an A minus. It's one of the better ones, but I'm saying that sort of the way that you say it about a lot of other modernists. You know, I really liked most of the book. I understood most of the book. I got confused at a certain part. I'm still not totally sure what happened here or why it's written this way or that way. But yeah, it was a good book. The next book we're going to talk about is Triptyque. Triptyque is available in English. There are three main stories that I see referenced when I did find content about this online, articles and things. Basically, the big three are there's a story in the countryside about two boys, and some stuff's happening, and a little girl drowns at the end of the thing, and it's kind of not stated very clearly. There's this thing about an actress, and then there's kind of a marriage that's falling apart. The book has a fair amount of sex in the second section of the triptych. It feels a bit like there is not an ending of the book, and that is by design, I believe, to encourage people to reread. I have seen somebody wrote online something about like a imaginary fourth part of the triptych that would conclude the story. The way the book is written, it really feels like it's kind of removed from time. So there are three sections in a triptych. A triptych is typically used to refer to a style of painting where you would have three panels. And the panels may not directly influence one another, but you see common elements between them. For instance, Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights is a very famous triptych, if I remember right. Yeah, I had to read the novel 3 times. I read the book the first time, and I felt like I didn't understand any of it. I didn't know what the hell was going on. There were disconnected conversations that very rarely lasted very long for you to find your grounding in, and then you'd suddenly come into something. So I finished it. I said, "F that! I can't just only read, based on that. I need to reread this book for my own comfort. I feel like I just wasted time if I don't understand what I read." So I reread the book. I liked it that time. I read it very, very slowly. Yeah, it took a while. I was going. Finally, I decided I was going to read it a third time to cap everything off. It's called a triptych, so it's threes and all this stuff, and why not read it 3 times? By the time I got to the third part, I felt like I basically got the novel. One thing that's unique about Triptyque in his oeuvre that I've seen, he does not use a lot of long sentences in Triptyque. That doesn't mean the book is any easier to understand. It's just that the sentences don't last pages and pages. I didn't talk about this, but in La Route de Flandres, I think there's like a 30 or 40 page section without any punctuation. I could be wrong. There might be some commas in there, but I really think there's a long section where there's just no punctuation. So that's kind of something that pops up in his style. It's not normally that long of the book. You might get like a 2 or 3 pages of this just monstrous paragraph that's one sentence, and it's broken up somewhere in the middle by like 2 words of dialogue or something. But Triptyque is written short sentences. They're not 3-4 word sentences, but you're getting 2-line sentences, 3-line sentences, rather than those many page things going on. Triptyque is an S tier book. It's not going to satisfy your need to read a novel if what you're looking for is a classic thing like Charles Dickens or a Dostoevsky novel. It's much more distant than that, and there's not a lot of dialogue. It's all these images, and the sentences are kind of short. It's not always clear how things fit together. He just hints at certain stuff happening rather than say it. And if you miss it, you can continue to read the book, but you're going to kind of wonder, like, I'm not quite getting what's going on here. You'll be aware of it, and it can be a little frustrating. I read a lot of French. I did read this in French. So I wouldn't know what it's like to read it in English, but the way that I typically read French if I'm reading difficult texts is just to calm myself down and reread the text. Read it once all the way through, and then keep going until you feel like you've got what you need to get out of it. So just repeat once, twice, 3 times. So Triptyque, and that's an S. The next work that's included in the Bibliothèque de la Pléiade is Discours de Stockholm. And that's his Nobel speech. I don't know a lot of Nobel speeches. It's not something that I've looked into extensively. I think Faulkner had a very good one, talking about the human spirit and such. And I think he has his kind of typical way of writing in his Nobel acceptance speech. Simon's Nobel acceptance speech is fairly straightforward. He talks about kind of the typical art stuff, and you're not missing a huge amount if you can't, or if you don't read it. I think it's available on the Nobel Prize website. I do believe that all of the acceptance speeches are available there. So if that's something you're interested in, check out his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. It is a literary artifact. It is a well-written speech. It's just that there's not much for me to say about it. I talk about novels on this channel mostly, or maybe a little bit of philosophy, and that's a Nobel acceptance speech. The final work that we're going to talk about is Le Jardin du Plant, and it means the Garden of Plants, which doesn't say a lot. That's actually a line in the book. He talks about a garden of plants. One of the characters says it. I'm not sure if that's supposed to mean a broader thing. This is a more accessible work than the other works. It's not a traditional novel. You're getting a lot of characters, so there's not much development of certain characters. There's a main character who appears to be based on Simon, and as in he says at one point he's Simon. Yeah, it's a think of it as autofiction. It's kind of like a W.G. Sebald novel. Apparently Sebald, I can't remember which Sebald novel it's in, but there's a quote from Simon in it. I think it's either The Immigrants or Rings of Saturn, I think. Where is my Sebald? Yeah. Anyway, he doesn't. He basically spends the novel reliving his travels and what he saw of being in the military. That's in different contexts in the novel at different times, and in the end of the novel, there's like a film being made or something. So there's other stuff going on, and it's a solid piece of autofiction. If you liked Annie Arnaud, you might like Claude Simon's Le Jardin du Plant. So if you liked Les Années, The Years by Annie Arnaud, you might want to check out Jardin du Plant, or the Garden of Plants, Le Jardin du Plant. But yeah, I'm going to give the Garden of Plants a, let's give that an A. I haven't given anything an A yet. So, that's Claude Simon. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention, I had forgotten to bring up, was other media I've been looking at. I've talked about this book before in my library tour. This is a graphic novel done by Jacques Tardi, who's a great illustrator. He's illustrated Celine, and I have several of his books. He's got some memoirs and detective stories and things as graphic novels. This book is the story of a folk singer who gets involved in union politics, and her name is Dominique Grange, and you can actually find her music on Spotify. So a lot of what I've been listening to is that. And I wanted to throw that in there because, again, it's been 40 some days since my last post. So this video has gone on for in the pre-cut. It's about 55 minutes. So I don't have a whole lot else to say. If you're still watching the video, know that I appreciate you. If you are interested in Claude Simon, I encourage that you read him. I'm going to be making a video on the second Bibliothèque de la Pléiade book when I read it. Now, I'm in the middle of a reread of the Garden of Plants. So I'm not going to abandon that, and I'll probably finish that tomorrow evening or Saturday. I plan on seeing the Odyssey this weekend. But it's a great book. Again, the Garden of Plants, we're giving an A, and I'm going to cut out now before I just start talking about nothing. So, without further ado, several books out. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.